The Bazball Delusion, written and read by Adam Grant. Jean-Luc Godard once said, "All you need for a film is a girl and a gun." I have neither. This is a one-off podcast, just as a way of refuting Bazball and exposing the client journalism which has synthetically amplified it over the last 3 years. A journalism which is now trying in vain to justify the syrupy rubbish it's written about it. I'm doing this alongside a short book covering the same topic. Cricket has moved or is moving from a sport to an entertainment, and as a consequence, a lot of fans have fallen out of love with the game and ended up turning their attentions elsewhere, myself included. Before I do, however, I'd just like to put my position on record, on YouTube and in print, as I have done on X, just to provide a counterweight to the narrative we've had over the last 3 years. Firstly, cricket, or English cricket, has gone through a period of cretinisation, brought about in large part by Brendan McCullum and Rob Key, but also by the introduction of the 100. Both of these have synthetically enabled and promoted, which have been synthetically enabled and promoted by a large section of the media and by journalists reporting on them. Journalists which seem to have gone from being journalists to de facto PR men for the ECB. In 2022, Rob Key, in his capacity as Sky pundit, a role where he normally had to act as a humorous foil to the more cerebral Atherton and Nasser Hussain, went on to criticise Silverwood's tactics on the 2021-2022 Ashes tour, a tour played under the COVID bubble. England lost 4-0, and he was then unfortunately made England managing director. In turn, he appointed Brendan McCullum as the coach of the Test side. They wanted to create a more attacking style of cricket in conjunction with a new captain, Ben Stokes. This became known as Bazball. The cricketing logic was paid professionals needed to be freed from the pressure of scoring runs and winning big series, unless they feel the need to quit international cricket and focus on more lucrative forms of the game, like franchise cricket. Bazball was aimed at a new demographic. The ECB were trying to attract the people who they attracted with the 100. People who didn't really like or understand cricket, people who like fireworks, people who are happy to advertise crisps on their clothes, children, and some football fans who need something to watch in between the end of one season and the start of the next. The PR behind Bazball was actually as important as the tactics. The tactics were pretty basic: short boundaries, flat pitches, and one-day style bowling. There was also rather performative outfielding, where a player would show his commitment by almost injuring himself to save a run. The catching, however, didn't improve. See Brisbane 2025. Because the tactics were questionable, they needed to talk in PR speak, to act as a safety net if or when things went wrong, and thus needed to kind of take a postmodernist approach to cricket, where results were some kind of false consciousness and subjectivity had replaced objectivity. Thus, instead of being a team measured by big series wins or the World Test Championship, scoring runs at a higher run rate, regardless of the situation, or wickets lost, would attract people to Test cricket. The people who ignored Test cricket in favour of franchise cricket. They then had to invent a backstory. Essentially, unless you won in this way, you weren't really looking at the bigger picture about the survival of the sport. Even previous legends were retrospectively dropped. Alistair Cook was someone that Stokes said would not have made his current side. Cook, 161 tests, almost 12,500 runs, batting average of 45, 33 test centuries. Stokes upgrades at Crawley, 63 tests, almost 3,500 runs, batting average of 31, 5 centuries. Crawley, according to McCullum, was not in the side to score runs, and instead he was there to set the tone. And this is the perfect example of the new media speak used by this regime, and possibly the result of Key's time at Sky. For this flawed and superficial approach to succeed, it needed willing media. Luckily, a large section of the British cricket media had transitioned into client journalism, merely supporting and promoting Bazball rather than scrutinising it. It appears that getting access for stories for their shows, magazines or books trumped serious critical assessment. The only other explanation is that highly experienced cricket watchers had a massive lapse in judgment, and this seems unlikely. The Bazball Revolution, the inside story of a Test cricket revolution by Lawrence Booth and Nick Holt, was a good example of the eagerness to promote this regime. This was written with an exceedingly small sample size and without a series win against either India or Australia, the only other two nations that put time and resources into Test cricket. It would be a bit like writing a book about a side that is top of the Premier League in August, having only beaten 3 mid-table sides. The win in Pakistan was exciting, with the first Test seemingly destined for a draw, but the series as a whole was one that any decent side would have won. Pakistan not the side they used to be, and after that series, England went a year and a half without winning another one. There was no sequel to the book. I've noticed more critical articles about this regime now, but it's a bit too late and the horse has bolted. Sky pays a lot of money to cover cricket in this country, and therefore it is in their interest to promote any regime or even series. How many series with the West Indies have we seen where the build-up is littered with references to great West Indian sides of the past, to obscure the fact that they haven't had a good Test side for a quarter of a century? So there's nothing sinister about Sky bigging up the side in the way that they do. There's nothing sinister about any company bigging up a TV series that they promote. Hopefully the audience can see through this, however. There still are a couple of issues I have with Sky. One, the closeness of the England camp, to the extent it's a bit like Team Sky in cycling. Ian Ward should not be using players' first names. It sounds a bit partial and a bit too pally. And secondly, it is clear that the fact that Rob Key used to work for them gives him an advantage that other coaches didn't have. He definitely has more leeway than the others. When I was young, I used to subscribe to Wisden. I remember getting a free hat, so I take no pleasure in saying this, but the magazine and podcast are not of the same standard. In some cases resemble more smash hits type journalism. Phil Walker strikes me as Thomas More in reverse, promoting something he has reservations with. There's a couple of younger men who seem to be more suited to this style of journalism, and they're kind of completely interchangeable. Mark Butcher stands out on the podcast because he thinks independently about cricket and is seemingly under no pressure to toe a particular line. There were journalists who retained their integrity and didn't ape this approach. Credit to people like George DeBell, Hugh Turberville, Oliver Brown, and ex-professionals like Jeff Boycott, Derek Pringle, and Azim Rafiq. These guys reported on what they observed rather than taking a particular line, and that's all we can ask for. Because of this slick PR approach and client media, Baz has successfully avoided being scrutinised in a way that far better coaches were. And he and Ben Stokes, a legendary player but flawed captain, give the impression of being delusional. Baz compared to other coaches. So Baz compared to other coaches this century. First of all, I'll compare him to the three best ones that we've had this century. Andy Flower, with no rhetoric or PR behind him, won 3 Ashes series, including 1 away, took England to the top of the Test rankings, won the T20 World Cup, whitewashed India at home, won in India, whitewashed New Zealand, and beat Pakistan, a better Pakistan side than the one that McCollum beat and then lost to. Duncan Fletcher transformed England from a side bottom of the rankings, won the Ashes by beating probably the best Test side ever, maybe the best series ever. Won England's first series in South Africa post-apartheid, and first series against the West Indies home and away in 30-odd years. Also winning in Pakistan and Sri Lanka when both sides were good sides. He also oversaw central contracts in the game and got the Champions Trophy final, losing with a couple of iffy LBW decisions. And in the end, he also left England with a side that was more able to score runs from the tail and better suited to playing spin. Now, Trevor Bayliss won the World Cup for England, won the Ashes, and beat India 4-1. Also lost the T20 World Cup final in 2016. So for people who support Baz, or kind of branch Brazilians, as you could call them, they're very reluctant to compare Brendan McCollum to those coaches, because obviously in comparison to them his record's really poor. So they seek to compare him to the poorer coaches, and one most recent, Chris Silverwood. But we can compare him to both Silverwood and Peter Moores. If you look at Peter Moores, won the beat India 3-1 at home, which is something that McConnum didn't do. So, in fact, Peter Moores has probably got a better record than McConnum. He won a big series and McConnum didn't. With Silverwood, Silverwood, like McConnum, beat South Africa, beat West Indies. Silverwood also won in Sri Lanka. Silverwood couldn't beat India and couldn't beat Australia. Exactly the same in McConnum. I think, in all fairness, if you're a fair-minded person, there isn't much difference between Silverwood and McConnum, and in fact, it probably would be joint bottom of the kind of rankings for England coaches this century. So let's see. The other thing about Silverwood is he also had to play a series in India and Australia during a COVID bubble, so he was at more of a disadvantage than McConnum